Thanks to the person who recently recommended to help me improve these videos. You know what? I just keep accumulating so many thoughts about the Constitution. I feel like it's more important that I be developing that right now, and I will work on sooner or later maybe presenting better. But for right now, there's just a lot to think about. I am working on analyzing Second Nephi chapter 1. I have been working on that one for a while. It's a huge one when it comes to principles of government. I think President Benson was one of the biggest contributors to um, defending that. I also think regarding religious freedom, as President Oaks is pushing for, which he's really done a lot of lectures on. I recommend looking it up, where he's guest lectured, where he explicitly says he's not representing the church, but still, it's very useful stuff to consider. Um, but how the withholding of certain information and data from us. So anyhow, truths will speak for itself. We'll get into that soon. And when truth is withheld and narratives are prioritized, I think we'll get in specifically quotes from Thomas Jefferson, who again I think there's something about him that's just important to pay attention to. And I can't tell you exactly why. But for right now, my main thought I had tonight, um, which really caught me off guard, I didn't expect it. I thought I was done for the day, was Solomon, King Solomon, sitting there with the two moms, and the one smothered her baby, which is very sad, and then the other one didn't. And when the one mom realized that she had smothered her baby, she took the other mom's baby and went in front of King Solomon. They were challenging whose baby it is. King Solomon says, "Well, I'll cut the baby in half. Then you can each have half." The actual mom said, "No, no, no, no. Go ahead, go ahead." Okay, and that's how King Solomon knew. Now, this isn't a perfect example, but here's my question. What is that baby that Americans, whether you're the legislative branch, as I say, or the executive branch, or the judicial branch, or the states, or the officers of government, or the citizens ourselves, what is that baby that we're all obligated to not be cutting in half, to be protecting from getting cut in half? So I came up with some examples of things that people might try to prioritize. Political parties. There's something that was ghostwritten for Joseph Smith. I can't remember who wrote it. Benjamin Winchester, I think, where it picks on John Tyler for not representing the Whigs well enough. John Tyler was a fantastic constitutionalist, and that was actually ghostwritten by Benjamin Winchester. Um, John Tyler was correct in the Constitution the way he analyzed it, and that's obvious. So no, not political party. Joseph Smith would not have promoted the idea of being loyal to political party first. Um, well, at least as a prophet, he wouldn't have. Boundaries of the United States territory. Maybe that's what we're supposed to defend at all costs. Not our political party, but the boundaries of the United States territory. The borders, what's currently the territory of the United States, whatever you do, do not let any of it get away. Maybe. Any law Congress presumes to pass, if Congress passes it, then we have to not let that law be violated. Or any executive order, maybe. And these are examples, by the way. I'm not actually saying this. Maybe that's what we think is the baby we need to protect at all costs, right? Or any judicial ruling. The judicial ruling, surely that's the final authority right there. So we have to defend that. The ideas of the founding fathers, even. Maybe we don't need the Constitution itself near as much as we just need to reference the words of the founding fathers, right? Or the ideas of British common law, maybe, or things you heard one of the apostles say about the Constitution, right? Or legal scholars and their great ideas, or good sounding policies. I mean, surely the policy has to be a good policy, and if it sounds good, then it's good. And or good sounding explanations of what the Constitution ought to be. Surely the Constitution has to be this, because otherwise the whole thing's going to fail. No, it's none of those. Okay. To me, I feel like there's two of the most important things in here. I'm going to read a quote from President Benson here, which is, in many schools, in many of the law schools today, you will hear that the Constitution is whatever the Supreme Court says it is. Could it be that the Supreme Court, which President McKay said is leading this nation down the road to atheism, is the agency to tell us what this divine document is? Can we learn best how to preserve it by studying what it is at the hands of some of those who are seeking to destroy it? But President McKay had a better approach when he encouraged us to support good and conscientious candidates who are truly dedicated to the Constitution in the tradition of our founding fathers. They are the ones the Lord referred to as wise men. It is to them, the Lord and his prophets, that we should go to determine what the Constitution is. There must have been a tradition of our founding fathers, or President McKay would not have referred to it. To the Lord, his prophets, and the founding fathers, we must go to learn of this divine document so that our efforts will be to preserve and not destroy the Constitution, which I've come up with my own way of analyzing what President Benson says about the founding fathers, because they didn't all agree. And so, really, first off, the most solid tradition of the founding fathers is what they did agree upon. And the easiest way to know what they did agree upon is the final results, which are those 5 principles, President Oaks gives us in defending our divinely inspired Constitution. But the final results are certain powers are enumerated to the federal government, certain powers aren't. And there's clearly a cutoff line. There has to be a cutoff line, otherwise the 10th Amendment is stupid, right? And pointless. So, Madison may have analyzed it one way, Jefferson may have analyzed it another way, Hamilton may have analyzed it another way. What I do, I look at what they say, and then I read the actual Constitution for myself and dig in and cross-reference and look at the verbs, look at the nouns, look at the adjectives, look at the adverbs, look at the purposes, the positions of power, the people's consent, the procedures, the powers enumerated, powers prohibited, and the promises guaranteed. And then I say, yeah, was Jefferson right when he said that? Was Hamilton right when he said that? When you analyze, even without the 10th Amendment, the very existence of Article 1, Section 18 tells us that clearly the Constitution was a very limited thing. Because otherwise they shouldn't have had even to worry about writing in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. But the fact that they wrote that in means everyone knew it was a limited Constitution. That was the only thing that was going to pass. Nothing else was going to pass. So there's your tradition of your founders. And then where one of them says a power exists that doesn't exist, look through it. Most of the time they're right. 90% of the time, Hamilton is one of the ones that most of us disagree with the most often. And honestly, hardly ever. I heard Scalia once say Hamilton, who is the most liberal interpreter of the Constitution, would be blown away at the things that the Supreme Court is allowing to go through nowadays. So there's that. Now, so we take an oath. Let's look at this real quick here. I got distracted a little bit. I meant to read this first before the President Benson quote. Article 6, Clause 3, the senators and the representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers both of the United States and of the several states shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as to the qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. What's the baby we're not supposed to be letting get cut in half? The Constitution, you guys. Not that complicated. Let's even look at the President's oath of office here. Before he enter on the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. Something John Tyler didn't ask the Whigs permission to do it because he wasn't supposed to. Because he cannot enter into the execution of his office without taking the following oath, right? I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend what? What do you think? What do you think it is? The Constitution of the United States. The political party, the Whig political party? No. Okay? Best sounding ideas or best explanations of what the Constitution is. Surely the Constitution must be perpetual. Surely the Constitution must be this. Surely it must be that. Otherwise it's complete failure, right? Well, surely it must be great. But there's an explanation for why it might not be, actually. Have you considered the explanation for why it be? And here's the even bigger one. What got ratified? Because that's what your oath is to, is what got ratified. And if your view of what it needs to be wasn't what got ratified, and you defend what you think it needs to be anyhow instead of what it actually is, you're not keeping your oath, dude. Congratulations. You just became that other mother, the one who smothered her baby. So, just saying, you guys. Just so anyhow, Sorry, that was kind of mean sounding of me, but it's the truth. I'm trying to be. I could be more tactful. I apologize. Okay. Um, Federalist 57. You might think, okay, well, who's allowed to do this? James Madison. Let's look at what he says. If it be asked, what is to restrain the House of Representatives from making laws, making legal discriminations in favor of themselves and a particular class of the society known as government, grabbing more for themselves, power-wise, right? Because, central government is the final arbiter of the powers of the central government, right? That's got to be it, right? That's not what he's arguing. He says, I answer the genius of the whole system. The genius of the whole system, the Article 6, Clause 3 oath, by the way. The nature of just and constitutional laws, and above all, the vigilant and manly spirit which actuates the people of America, a spirit which nourishes freedom, and in return is nourished by it. If this spirit shall ever be so far debased as to tolerate a law not obligatory on the legislature as well as on the people will be prepared to tolerate anything but liberty. That's a powerful one. In other words, I keep saying there's three main branches. Everyone knows how to talk about that. We went to school. We learned it, right? But what about the rest of it? Article 4 and 5, the states. Article 6, the officers of government. Article 7, through the Bill of Rights, the people. We have an obligation to peaceably to assemble. We have an obligation also. Look, this is another one. I'm going to analyze this one in depth too. This is one I keep meaning to post. But when you study the Constitution, there's far too much to talk about. Okay. We often talk about the operative clause of the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's cool. That's what I focused on first for the longest time. But let's look at the first portion. A well-regulated militia being a pretty good idea to the security of a free state. No, not a pretty good idea. A well-regulated militia being something that we recommend. No. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a what? Of a free state. Being necessary to what? The security. The security. In other words, you cannot. Let's go back and listen to this Madison quote here. The vigilant and manly spirit which actuates the people of America, a spirit which nourishes freedom and in return is nourished by it. Shoot, if anything, we recently saw some private gun owner defend someone, and everybody's like, what better thing to stop criminals than just the idea that, oh man, I don't know, there might be somebody out there who practices like that guy, right? So dang useful to a free people. Police forces didn't exist historically, Okay, now let's read Hamilton Federal 78. Here there is no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of a delegated authority contrary to the tenor of the commission under which is it exercised is void. No legislative act, therefore, contrary to the Constitution, can be valid. Just period. It can't be valid. It's impossible. Federalist or Kentucky resolutions from Thomas Jefferson, where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, nullification of the act is the rightful remedy, that every state has a natural right in cases not within the compact to nullify their own authority, all assumptions of powers by others within their limits. Okay? Because it's true, 10th Amendment. Who had the power reserved to them to decide whether or not the Constitution had been violated? Nobody. Well, what does the Constitution say if it's not reserved to somebody in the Constitution nor explicitly prohibited to the states? It's reserved to the states or the people. So who's it reserved to? The states or the people, either one. Or the officers of government, obviously, because otherwise, what's that Article 6, Clause 3 oath for? It's pointless. And we'll get into that here in a second. John Marshall said an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void. All right, let's look at this. John Marshall says, this would be to overthrow, in fact, what was established in theory and would seem, at first view, an absurdity too gross to be insisted on. In other words, why otherwise does it direct the judges to take an oath to support it? How immoral to impose on them, impose the oath on them, right? Impose it on them if they were to be used as the instruments and knowing instruments for violating what they swear to support. In other words, but is it only the judges that swear to support it? Right, so let's go ahead and say the other officers. Let's just insert where it says judges, officers of government, because everyone takes that oath, not just the judges. And it says, why otherwise does it direct the officers of government to take an oath to support it? How immoral to impose this oath on them if they were to be used as the instruments and knowing instruments for violating what they swear to support. It's insane. Okay. So, President Benson, our prophet, said, Constitution, this was when he was the sitting prophet, we must learn the principles of the Constitution and abide by its principles. Its precepts, I'm sorry. Have we read the Constitution and pondered it? Are we aware of its principles? Could we defend it? Can we recognize when a law is constitutionally unsound? The church will not tell us how to do this, but we are admonished to do this. Okay, so that's apparently a responsibility of members of the church, too. Okay, and by the way, honestly, dudes, I don't go around using the word precepts in my daily life, and I just feel like looking that up real quick here, because it feels like a very specific word that I've always had the gist of, but it's been a while since I've looked. A precept is a general rule, principle, or law that guides a person's moral behavior and actions. They are often taught by authority figures and rooted in the philosophical and religious traditions. I always say, okay, so if you want to see the limiting filters of the Constitution, first off, it gives us the proper purposes of government, then the positions of power, the manners in which the people's consent is given those positions of power, the procedures that those positions are allowed to use to validate the exercise of their powers, but they have to only exercise the powers enumerated to them, or the promises guaranteed, and they cannot exercise the powers prohibited to them. Okay, so so I'd say that's the obvious precept. That's the way my brain has broken it down through diligent study. Last one here. Sorry, this is running long, but I think it was so I actually dug up quotes for this one and am putting off my chores. I'll get out there here in a second. Understand the Constitution. This is from Dallin H. Oaks in 2010, I believe. Constitution Day at the Tabernacle in Utah. So he says, understand the Constitution. All citizens should be familiar with its great fundamentals, the sovereignty of the people, the structure of federalism that divides powers between the state and the federal government. The individual guarantees in the Bill of Rights the principle of separation of powers among the various branches of government. We should take alarm at and consider how to oppose any action that would infringe on these fundamentals. So we should take alarm at and consider how to oppose the infringement of these fundamentals. Let's see, there's one more too. Maintain civility in public discourse. Promote patriotism. Anyhow, there's a point where he also says something about well, first off, earlier in there he says the wisdom. It's just a great talk to study, you guys. Okay. Some things said by various persons in recent... we should be more careful with the way we throw around the idea of, that something is unconstitutional. A constitution should not be used as a weapon to end debate. A public policy or proposed law that is unwise is not necessarily unconstitutional. Even if it is a stupid proposal, it is not necessarily unconstitutional. A constitution gives people, elected leaders, the power to make many decisions that are wrong. Anyhow, if we call something unconstitutional, we should be prepared to explain what provision or principle of the Constitution it violates. In this way, we can stimulate discussion and seek unity. And again, I'm going to give my 7 P's, and these have just brought nothing but good fruit for me. Okay, I feel like the Constitution is the most obvious thing in the world to me at this point. And I don't need the Supreme Court explaining it to me again. It's proper purposes of government. See the preamble, for example. That's one of the best spots you're going to find it. Positions of power, the people's consent given to those positions of power, procedures for exercising the enumerated powers and promises, then the enumerated powers, the promises guaranteed, and then the powers prohibited. Don't touch those, right? And yes, this is, you could say it's the division of powers is something that President Oaks taught, right? Yes, this assumes that you're also learning to recognize those things. But then as you look at those things, also simultaneously filter it through these 7 P's. So President Oaks would say, division between the people are the source of government power, which, boom, puts the responsibility on us again to not cut that baby in half, as I've been talking about Solomon, right? The division with powers between the states and the federal government, the division between the 3 main branches of the federal government, the Bill of Rights, and especially the 10th Amendment, and then 5th, our loyalty is to the Constitution itself, and it's a written Constitution, as President always clarifies, and so therefore everyone can read it for themselves, right, and discern. But you have to earn it. You have to work for it, because reading something once doesn't teach you to cross-reference it. Almost needs to be daily. Think about learning a language, you guys. Or think about guitar. We say, as I'm a guitar teacher, right? Who does better? Who do you think does better? The student who practices a half an hour a day every day, or the student who practices for 3 hours all in one day for 3 days in a row and then never touches it again? Okay? Well, you might not know, but as a music teacher, I'll tell you, it's the one who does it daily. Daily, daily, daily. And that's what I do with the Constitution. That's why these videos are so poorly produced, right? If you made it this far, congratulations. Welcome to the Constitution Nerd Club, I guess. Or honestly, like I wouldn't call us nerds. We're in the tradition of the founders is all. So anyhow, thanks for listening, you guys. The oath is to the Constitution. That oath falls on everybody: legislative, executive, judicial, the states, the officers of government, and we the people. Thanks for listening. See ya.